This video is going to focus on children's portfolios, what they are, how they can be used, and what's included inside of them. So the purpose of a child's portfolio, an individual child's portfolio, is so you can document an individual child's growth. Even in early childhood, we want to make sure that we're noticing changes within the child's development within the various developmental domains, and having a portfolio for each child allows you to collect information that can help you document where a child started the year and where they ended the year, or how their development was in one classroom and how it continued to develop in other classrooms. This information can also be very useful when you're having conferences with parents and even future teachers. So if you start a child portfolio in one classroom, you have your parent conferences maybe twice a year, you pull this information out and you show them physical evidence of how you've seen their child develop across the board in different areas, and we'll talk about how you can do that with the items that you have within the portfolio. But this information can also be helpful for future teachers. So when they leave your classroom and they go to, let's say, the 3-year-old classroom or the 4-year-old classroom, they can see what the child has already done, not only from the items you have in there, such as the checklist and the observations, but also from the child's individual work. So they're artifacts. That's what that's called. And of course, it's an organized way to keep records of information. We always want to have that even within the early childhood field. Of course, child portfolios can also be used within elementary schools for the same purposes. So what do you want to include in a child portfolio? So you want to start off with developmental checklists or milestones. Depending on the program where you are, if you created your own program, you can create these developmental checklists or milestones. Later on, I'm going to show you examples of 2 of them that you can download for free from the internet, and I'll give you the website information for that also. Objective observations you also want to include in the portfolio. So observations you want to have on maybe the child's language development, their fine motor development, their gross motor development, their language, their social and emotional development. But of course you want the observations you have to be objective and not to have your personal feelings in that, because again, you're going to use this information in parent conferences or when talking with other teachers. And then finally, you want to also include child-created artifacts. So these are items that demonstrate different types of development. And so the artifacts that I'm going to show you will demonstrate a child's fine motor development, their math and science development also. So the samples of the checklist, I've got them from 2 different locations. One is from the Center for Disease Control, the CDC, and so there's the website for that. And then the other one is from Children's Learning Institute, and there's the website for that also. So let's start off looking at the developmental checklists. So this one here is from the Center for Disease Control, and this is what it looks like. The checklists that they offer start off at 2 months and it goes up. So I'm going to scroll down to about we'll go to a 4-year-old one, so just hold on. I know this can sometimes bother people, so I just gave you a heads up. There's a 6-month. And okay, where are we at here? So we'll go here, 4 years old. So this is your child at 4 years old. So you see they have the development expectations broken down into different categories. This one has social and emotional, language communication, cognitive, which is learning, thinking, problem solving. So if you observe the child doing these types of activities, you can mark it off. I would also suggest that you put a date by it. The purpose of having the date by it is so if you start this checklist, let's say in January, and then they move to a new classroom in August, the new teacher could also use this checklist to continue on, and just having the date shows how the child's developed over time. A benefit of this checklist is it tells you some possible things that you want to look for if a child's not able to do. So if they're missing milestones, if they show no interest in interactive games or make-believe, can't follow 3-part commands, that kind of thing. These are maybe some red flags that you might want to look out for. And so this is both you as the teacher, but then also this is information you can share with the parents. And again, this checklist is free, so you could give it to your parents if you wanted and had them maybe fill part of it out, and that could also be added as part of the child portfolio. Perhaps they might fill it out at the beginning of the year, and then you fill it out at the end, and you can see physically on paper how this child has developed over time. The other checklist here is the one from the Children's Learning Institute. This one is for infant and toddlers. So it goes from infant age up until I believe it's 48 months, and we're going to scroll down again to the preschool age. In Texas, they still call that sometimes toddlers, and so that's what you'll see here. So here it is, 36 to 48 months. So again, there's not a spot for you to actually put the date when you observe the behavior, so I recommend you write that on the side. But these skills are broken down into health and motor, social and emotional, and I'm going to scroll down for you to see the next part. Cognitive, and then they have language and literacy. So there's quite a bit there. Again, there's also a section for red flags. So you could possibly use both of these checklists, or again, if the program has a checklist you want to use, you could do that. But it gives you some different skills that you want to look for that are expected, typically developing children to demonstrate at these ages. You'll see, though, that there's an age range, 36 to 48 months. So if you have a child who just is 3 years old, you're not going to expect them to have all of this. That's why I said this information and these checklists could be used by multiple teachers within a program. So again, these are just part of the information that you would have within a child's portfolio. You might have the written observations and you use that to mark off this information on the checklist, or you could use the observations as a completely separate tool to also help you plan activities. So the next thing I'm going to show are child artifacts, and we're going to explain what's the purpose of those and what kind of notes you would want to take when you're including a child artifact in the child's portfolio. So this one here was created by a child named Colin. At the top you can see he did not write his name, but it does look like he wrote the numbers 1 at the bottom here. I saw the child when he did this art activity, and for this one he traced the circles and then he cut them out himself. So that's a skill that we could talk about, is that he had the circles, he traced them. He actually didn't trace all of them, because you can see here where it looks like it's perfectly done, but he did trace some of them, but he did cut them out. So again, he used those fine motor skills of being able to hold the scissors, turn the paper to cut it out. He also was using his imagination, and he had made a figure of his father, and it was dictated here what this picture was, and he said that it's his dad and he's number 1. And so the child wrote number 1, and then the caregiver wrote what it was, my dad, number 1. You can see here that the child has, 2 eyes and a mouth. Later on with children's development, we start to see more details included in their artwork. So this might be something that's really good to see, perhaps, when the child is 2 to 3 years old. But then when we see their artwork when they're 5, because we would have all of this in the portfolio, you can really see their development. Whereas other times, if you don't have these type of artifacts, then that's something you have to try to remember. So having it physically there really helps with this information. So you would include this artifact in the child portfolio, then either on the back or on a separate paper, you're going to write down what did you observe, what skills are being demonstrated by this artifact. So again, the child had fine motor skills, they were able to trace, they were able to cut. We have some here, a little bit tells us about the child's creativity, and they have 2 eyes and a mouth. It looks like he tried to form a body. So these are just notes that you're going to write, but again, they're objective notes, so you're only stating the facts. The child did write the number 1. If that child wrote the number 1 without being prompted, that's something you could put down, is that he might not have been able to write my dad, but he knew how to write the number 1. So that's a math concept skill. Also could be a fine motor or a writing skill. Here's another one, another artifact to show you. This one here, this child, same child, Colin, created a rocket ship. And so he's demonstrating his imagination here, also some math skills, with being able to, again, he cut these figures out, so that's fine motor, but he was able to create a rocket ship using different shapes. So he used different rectangles here, some squares here, circles, triangles to create his rocket ship. And here, if you notice, he actually spelled his name. This child did spell his name backwards for a while. He since doesn't do that anymore, but that's something to notice here. Here's the C-O-L-L-I and then the N. So having the artifact from the first one that I showed you where the teacher wrote his name to having this one, that right there is showing a development in skills, or what I sometimes call a progression in skills. The child was not able to write their name before, now they are able to write their name. We don't always expect perfection. Yes, he did write his name backwards and his letters aren't formed if you want to look at the correct sizes and so forth, but it's still a progression of skills because he wasn't able to write it before and now he can write it. He recognizes his name. He recognizes the letters in his name. And I can say that he recognizes the letters in his name because, again, I know this child and I saw him being able to do this. So again, I can make some objective notes on what this is, and this is this artifact. So again, he's showing fine motor skills. He's showing some creativity with the way that he drew something on his rocket ship. This is definitely development in his writing skills and understanding who he is and what his name represents. So again, another artifact. You might decide to use an artifact if you have a picture of a block structure that the child's created. And that might show, their ability to stack things, their ability to sort, and that kind of thing. You want to include pictures or, samples such as this that really demonstrate skills and skills development. And when you're going through the portfolio, you want to try to show how skills have changed, how they've developed. So again, that progression of skills. The last thing I want to show you isn't something that I would not include in the portfolio because it's really not showing anything about the child's development. So here, this is Colin's handprint, and it says, "I'm your little sunshine." And it's really cute for a parent to have because here they have their child's handprint on a yellow piece of paper, on a sun. But the child really didn't do anything here. All he did was put his hand on there. So it's not really showing his development. It's not showing his skills that he knows or anything like that. So although this is cute and you might send it home, this is not something that you'd want to include in a child's portfolio, mainly because it's not showing any of the skills that the child himself or herself is demonstrating. And that is the purpose of a child's portfolio.